You owe the bank $100,000 and you can't sleep. You owe the bank $1 million and the bank can't sleep. But there is one debtor that owes $34 trillion and sleeps better than anyone. It doesn't need to pay it back. It has never planned to. Its creditors are spread across the entire world, and not one of them is asking for the money back. This debtor is called a government. This is not a story about default. This is a story about how the entire modern world is propped up by a logic that seems completely absurd. You think the rule is borrow money, pay it back. But the real rule is this: as long as everyone believes you will pay, you never have to. Let's start with an Englishman. 1694. King William III of England is out of money again. He's at war with France, and the treasury is empty. He wants to raise taxes, but Parliament won't approve it. He wants to borrow, but Europe's bankers won't lend. The previous king borrowed from them, and when he died, the new king refused to honor the debts. A king's credit lasted exactly as long as the king. When a man died, the debt died with him. But this time, someone came up with a genius idea. Don't let the king borrow money. Let Britain borrow money. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded. It was not the king's bank. It was the nation's bank. It issued something called a government bond. You buy this piece of paper, and the government promises to pay you interest every year. Forever. The first buyers were London merchants. They realized it was an excellent deal. The government would never run away. The interest arrived on time, and this piece of paper could be sold to the next person. A new cycle was born. The government borrowed money to fight wars. The merchants collected interest. The government won the wars and seized colonies. The colonies' wealth paid the interest. Everyone won. This was the birth of government debt. It was not a scam. It was an invention that allowed a government to borrow money forever. From that day forward, the British government never paid off its debt. It grew from £1.2 million in 1694 to over £2 trillion today. And Britain has never defaulted. Not because it has the money, but because it never needs to repay the principal. It only needs to pay the interest. And the money for the interest can be borrowed from new debt. You might ask, who buys all this new debt? The answer is everyone. Your pension fund, your insurance company, the bank where you keep your savings, and central banks all over the world. The entire global financial system is built on the assumption that governments will keep paying interest forever. If that assumption ever cracks, the world collapses. In 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the global financial crisis erupted. What did the Federal Reserve do? It didn't ban risky banking. It didn't punish Wall Street. It turned on the printing presses and bought trillions of dollars of U.S. government bonds. The official name for this operation was quantitative easing, but in essence it was this: a central bank printing money to buy its own government's debt. This sounds like a giant Ponzi scheme. Use money from new investors to pay interest to old investors. But this scheme has been running for over 300 years, and it's only getting bigger. The U.S. national debt went from $75 million in 1776 to $260 billion in 1945 to over $34 trillion today. This curve is not an accident. It is a rocket ship pointed straight up. But the strangest part of the story is not how big the debt is. It's that no one wants it to get smaller. Imagine you are one of America's creditors, say China or Japan or Saudi Arabia. You hold hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. government bonds. Do you want the U.S. government to pay you back? No. You want to stay in debt forever, paying interest on time. Being repaid means you receive a pile of cash, but lose an asset that generates stable income. In an uncertain world, an asset that pays interest reliably every year is worth far more than a pile of cash. So the strangest phenomenon on earth occurs. The creditors are more afraid of the debt being repaid than the debtor is. This is why the U.S. government can owe $34 trillion and sleep soundly at night. Not because it's too powerful to default, but because the entire world wants it to keep owing. Its debt is not a weakness. It is a hostage. Every country holding U.S. government bonds is tied to the same boat as America. The boat can leak, but can never sink. You might think this has nothing to do with you, but you pay for this system every single day. Why is the interest rate on your bank savings so low? Because central banks keep rates near zero to make it easier for the government to pay its interest. Why does your pension never grow fast enough? Because most of its assets are allocated in government bonds. And when bond yields are low, your pension yields are low. Why does inflation always seem to creep up? Because governments have every incentive to let prices rise. Inflation erodes debt, making today's $34 trillion feel much less terrifying in 10 years. The money in your bank account is shrinking. Your pension can't keep up with inflation. Your wages aren't rising fast enough. These are not business cycles. They're not market fluctuations. They're the cost of government debt passed quietly onto you. In 1694, an Englishman sat in a coffeehouse and signed his name on a government bond. He didn't know that he was buying not just the first piece of government debt, but a set of rules that would last to this day. The government never pays you back, but the money you owe the bank, that is due tomorrow.